Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Vegan Tour Guide Podcast with your host, Mike Knight, where we'll bring you great information about a vegan plant-based diet. It doesn't matter if you've been vegan for years, part-time vegan, or just gathering more information. This podcast is for you. Thanks again for joining, and let's get today's tour started.
Hey, everybody. What's going on? Welcome to the Vegan Tour Guide Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Knight. For everybody that's tuning back in, thank you so much for dropping back in with us here, the loyal listeners. And for those that are new to the first time, hey, welcome aboard. Glad you decided to go for a spin here with us, go on a journey, and hear about today's guest, Kacie. And also, I invite you to visit the website, vegantourguide.com, where you'll find the podcast, among recipes, a whole lot of information, blog posts and everything. And you can, again, listen to the other podcasts, the previous ones there, because that's what it's all about. It's definitely a big variety of people that I love having on the show. Because the reason I do that is I want you to hear, different journeys, different tales, different approaches to, people that are, plant-based vegan and how they went about it. You'll find the people that were able to just, flip that switch. And then you're going to find a lot of people, too, that phase things out over time. And I want people to hear that. You're going to hear what made it easy for them, if you will. And then you're also going to hear maybe, some stuff they had a little bit of trouble with and how they, acclimated around that. Again, that's what I want, is all the relevant information and inspiration that you can use in your lives and also pass on to others. So that is what it's really about. Always appreciate you stopping by. Email me, vegantourguide@gmail.com, so I can know more about what you're looking for and, maybe what you got out of the shows and what we can put more of the shows on that really resonates. And speaking of what resonates, I really enjoy doing this. I love doing this to pass it on. I love interviewing the different people because a lot of times I never know where conversations are going to go. And that's some of the funnest part about it to me is just wondering, because I love having it. I tell people it's like just having, a coffee or tea talk. That's how I love phrasing this, because that way it just allows the conversation to go somewhere organically and you learn new things about people. And that's really the case, especially today with Kacie. Kacie owns a company called Move That Dough Baking Company. However, to stop right there and say just about that, which takes up a lot of her time, a lot of focus, being an entrepreneur would be selling it woefully short, as you're going to hear, because Kacie gives back and stays so involved in so many things to help others. It's amazing. I really think, and not trying to be corny, but you know what? The world needs more Kacies, because that is what she really brings. And I love talking with her, finding out more about her. And definitely she's a person I look forward to staying in touch with. I'm fortunate she's here in my local market of Charlotte, North Carolina. And so stay active with some of the stuff that she's got going on. I know you're going to love her story. You'll get a lot out of it. She's definitely going to inspire you with her story and her giving back. And so without further ado, here's Kacie.
All right, Kacie. Well, welcome to the Vegan Tour Guide. Thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah. What have you got going on today?
Just did a delivery, and now I'm trying to make time to work out. I know from following your schedule, you really mean it when you say make time, because I know we'll get into it, but you were involved in a lot of stuff. Yeah. Sometimes it makes your brain kind of just super scattered, and so I'm really lucky to have people who are patient with me and will remind me of things that I forget and whatnot. So it's an interesting side of, I think, owning a business that people don't really shed a lot of light on.
Oh my gosh, we do have some of the same friends.
Yeah.
I'm your twin. I know that all too well.
Yeah.
Well, Kacie, I'd love for everyone to hear, just kind of starting out, what I love to always do is just kind of hear people's kind of journeys for themselves to plant-based, because I always find that people's journeys, there's always some overlap where they're unique and similar in some ways, but in other ways they have that unique component that helps people, relate, because I love telling people it's not a one-size-fits-all. You know what I mean? It's for everybody. It's not,
There's
it is
so many
for
different reasons, too.
Yeah.
So many different motivators. And you have to find your own with any lifestyle change, really, to have it be authentic. And authenticity is, I think, the only true catalyst for change.
Yes.
Because we see this in the American diet. You have so many different diets pitched at you and so many different people profiting off of whatever diet you decide to become a part of, like there are huge corporations that exist for diets. And to me, I was like, man, this just seems like a game. And this is another way I think that bigger corporations and the people behind them, which really to me, a lot of the times personify greed, kind of keep control over people. And I'm from the Midwest. Like I grew up with actual amber waves of grain, I love going on drives by fields, and I love cows. I think they're the cutest things in the whole world, but I still ate them. I'm from Nebraska. Yeah. It's steak country. Let's go to Omaha Steaks. Let's eat steak, medium rare, great, whatever. And I never even thought twice about it. In fact, I was taught that, I was raised Christian and taught then that God put animals on the earth for me to eat. This already consuming kind of brainwashing where you're oh, okay, well, that makes sense, ? And I understand that it can be, a survival thing and that culturally there are different reasons that meat is consumed. And so for me, I don't hate on every company or every person that consumes meat or dairy. I don't fault anyone for that as a very foundation. But what motivates me and what really I guess kind of disgusts me is what we have done then to this industry. It's not simple. It's not this 40-year-old farmer going out and petting his cow and making sure it's getting the right foods to have proper growth and caring for it. There's not love going into it unless you can afford to sustain buying your meat and dairy from an ethical small farm. Typically now it's just hi, I have the choice of having real food on my plate, or I have the choice of eating a bunch of antibiotics that I'm not even consensually consuming. And then I'm not educated on what those antibiotics and these growth hormones are doing then inside of my body and to my cells. And so to me, it became a personal problem where it seemed really invasive. It seemed really, like I said, non-consensual. It seemed really misleading that we don't educate our citizens starting from infancy on how their bodies work and what foods actually do to their bodies. Unless you're lucky, you get that education. But if you're the average American citizen growing up, you don't get that education. So we restrict access to education. And then we shove these pseudo foods down people's throats and we make them the most affordable, which is another reason that with my business, I try to make my things just as affordable as the common bleached flour, pseudo food alternative, so that people of all different sort of economic backgrounds could potentially be able to afford real food. So to me, I think plant-based is just as political as, who you vote for. Kind of who am I going to give my money to? What am I going to allow inside of my body and inside of my mind, really? Because it impacts your brain. Your food does.
Yep.
So if I'm going to be the strongest citizen, if I'm going to have the most clarity, if I'm going to be able to live a full life, then I need to be aware of what I'm doing to my body, starting with what goes inside of it.
Gotcha.
So I guess that's been my process. I watched my mom has diabetes and a bunch of different, a host of health problems that only grow, which is really interesting because she's been on prescriptions for her whole life. So if these, what we call medicine was actually working, and if this modern American diet worked for our bodies, this wouldn't be such a cycle and it wouldn't be getting worse and worse and worse. So I think that was a big motivating factor, was kind of being at first I wanted to make baked goods that she could eat. And then I was wait a second, I'm getting educated. What do we do to our flour? Where does my cocoa powder come from? Slavery? What? And so to me, just everything is about ethics. And it's hard to balance all of it and to be able to afford it, which is why I guess we need to demand affordable prices and demand the good food so much that it can be mass produced in a sustainable way and in an affordable way.
Well, your food, I'm going to tell you right now, I'll tell everybody, rocks. I had it over there at this Humane League Gala.
Yeah.
And, it was awesome. Maddie was telling me, she's you have to try this. And I was yeah. And so I started eating them. And so I'm going to go ahead and just spill the beans on myself. Guilty as charged. I may have had a couple seconds or thirds.
I mean, but they're mini, so whatever.
They were awesome. And so I know you do a lot, and we'll get into that. So the transition to you, was it when you were like young, or how long have you been plant-based vegan?
No. I guess it was kind of a back and forth thing for a while, and luckily through friends, like, once again, because I was raised, super, 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 super conservative in every area. So then when I started changing my diet, it was largely like a blessing through friends I had made outside of my immediate circle that I knew growing up, who had different lifestyles and who kind of shed light on it. And you're just kind of like, oh, that's an option. Oh, there's another train of thought happening here. I can make my own decision like crazy. And so probably in my early 20s, I started going back and forth through like friends that kind of inspired me and through getting like slowly educated. But then it's interesting, this like cultural battle that happens even within families, because I remember just feeling like I almost had to eat meat and had to eat these things because they were prepared for me. It's like at this holiday, everything has meat or animal products in it. So it was really, really hard, and I would get like teased and kind of like made fun of, and you're made to feel like you're this like hippie, like trendy, blah, 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 like just written off. And so for a while, it was kind of a mental battle of standing up for just like, I don't want to. I would rather eat something else. And so, yeah, I think it was back and forth all through my early 20s, and it didn't really stick until my later 20s because of things like that. And then there are all these different, trains of thought. Once again, people who think that if you're vegan, the things you're consuming then, like soy or almonds or these things, are also political. And, there's just like so many things now that we have to take into account, even with our water. So I think to me, it's kind of like there should be grace in the process, I think, for people. And I think there's a lot of like, I don't want to make a diet more of a battleground than it already is. And so what I wanted to do was create a bakery that didn't use these things so that it could encompass all people. And so it could encompass everybody from people who don't eat milk just because they're lactose intolerant. Like, fine, you're welcome here. Oh, you eat steak? Fine. This is still a kick-ass donut. Please eat it. And so I just wanted to be broad, and I wanted to make it an educational platform for social issues, and that includes our major food industries.
Well, you have mentioned education several times, so I want to jump to another topic that I know is big with you, that is an awesome thing you do that I'd love you to talk about, and that's your involvement with community charter.
Oh,
in
yeah.
The school. I'd love for you to tell everyone more about that listening, because that is something awesome that you do.
Yeah. Man, I've always loved kids. Like, I find them easier to talk to than most adults because they're not jaded yet, and they're don't
honest.
Have a bunch of like persona happening. It's just them. They're authentic, and it's terrifying, but also so beautiful. I'm like, oh, you always get the truth from a child. And so education, as we know, is the most powerful weapon against manipulation, really, I think, by these major food industries. And so the other thing that pulled at my heart with this, like, I met this woman, she has a son, and he has a neurological disadvantage, and oftentimes when he eats gluten or bleached flour, and these common things that we've found with kids who are beautiful but on the spectrum, like food coloring, will act out then. And the behaviors that we're trying to, like, nurture get worse when this fake food impacts their cells that way. And so I did a little pop-up, like, for the class. I came in and made flourless black bean brownies that were only sweetened with, I think, like, pure organic maple, to kind of relieve the stigma to the whole class of kids who can't have milk or kids who can't have flour. Because there's actually, like, bullying that happens in these classrooms. Like, I had a mom recently write me, and she was like, man, my 4-year-old's getting made fun of and told he can't eat pizza because he doesn't eat dairy, and all the kids are making fun of him. And it's like, this starts young. So if I can be an ally to these kids that age and come in and make it, like, relieve the stigma off of the word vegan or off of eating plants even, or eating real food, then this is my job. And so from that one class, I just was like, man, can I please, like, volunteer my time and come in and, like, teach very basic nutrition? And so we would learn everything about like what fiber means and what chia seeds do. And that spiraled into, so community charter is a beautiful student body, but their school hasn't had the money to upkeep. So their kitchen is not up to code as per the health department. And so they can't make food there. And then, so I was trying to problem solve and be like, well, like what nonprofit provides food for a certain amount of money, but then the school can't get a grant because they don't have enough students. And so they're just left without an option. So the kids have to bring their food from home every single day. And when you're like a working parent, you know, it's already hard enough to like grab a Lunchable, much less to be really, really, really thoughtful in the food that goes into these lunches. And so, I was like, well, sure, I can do like once a week at least. Like, let me try to make things. And I was just going to like try to do it out of pocket at first. And then luckily there's some beautiful souls at Trader Joe's who go through and will like ask me specifically what I need that week, or try to like get things that, you know, are kind of imperfect. And we've had a couple of farms start to get interested too in donating their imperfect produce, or just things, you know, like greens. And so now we created an entirely plant-based and mostly organic lunch for these kids every Wednesday. And it's 50 cents, which is going back into a donation towards the school for the end of the year field trips. And so really it's free. It's just redirecting their money and making them have incentives to eat it, because their parents will be like, man, we paid 50 cents. You're going to eat that food when they walk in, and I've made them something healthy, you know, and they otherwise would rather have something else. But that's how that started. And I don't believe that that school is going to be open next year, which has just been like a heartbreaking process to try to fight that battle. But now the battle has opened up, where we're trying to present to CMS and the entire, you know, state school board, or city school board, I should say, about increasing healthy and plant-based options for all of the public schools.
Yeah,
so I have no idea where it's going to go from here, but I'm like, please, yes, this is where my energy needs to go, because my brain doesn't turn off, because I so believe that the food that we let into our children's mouths impacts their brains and their cells in a way where we're creating disease that doesn't need to be there. And it's hard to not feel like it's intentional, because you're like, man, if I'm just like a basic citizen and I believe this stuff, then who is it within, you know, Monsanto? Who is it within the FDA? Who is it within all of these, like even the Center of Disease Control? You know, like where's the transparency? Where's the accountability? And we cannot keep creating disease for future generations of kids. Like we're already seeing what has happened.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, it's amazing. I'm sure you know all of them, but the stats, and they talk about, you know, we're the first generation now that, you know, that our children aren't expected to live longer than us. You know, now they're saying somewhere upwards. I saw something the other day, and you can maybe even help me on it. How many people are now thinking they're going to be diagnosed with diabetes? In like
oh, my gosh. I was just thinking that. Like, I don't even know the numbers, but it's like these kids, you know, kids are almost being born with it. It's not a question of like at what age you're going to have it or what you can do. It's like you already have a disease. Like, welcome to life. And to me, it's like, who is going to then? It's our responsibility if we have this information to like be the barriers of this. But then you see people who try, you know, like these scientists and these holistic health professionals who have been curing diseases by making injectable vitamins, you know, and then their labs get raided at gunpoint by the FDA. And you're like, okay, so this battle is actually way deeper than surface level. Like this is intentional. And if you talk too loud about it, you put your business at risk.
Yeah.
And organic farmers are being arrested, you know? And so it goes from being some like hippie kind of blah, blah, blah talk to being like, no, but really for the sake of our society, for the sake of future generations, even what we're doing to our atmosphere, you know, it's like, this is a human rights issue to me. And that's where it stuck. You know, it wasn't like through looking at a chicken and being like, oh my gosh, you're a living thing and I'm a living thing. Like that wasn't the moment for me, because I was raised to be so like just practical, I guess, about it in a Midwest sense. Where I'm like, oh, there's a chicken. That's eventually going to be food. And now to me, I'm like, oh, that chicken has growth hormones. And that chicken has antibiotics that are going to go into someone's body.
Yeah.
So I guess that's like where I definitely, it stuck with me in my DNA.
And it's interesting to hear that because, like you said, everyone has their things that they just kind of resonate with them and make that impact. For me, it was just, kind of my path started on multiple things, but one was just, preventative health. And the irony was, if you knew me growing up, you would know, I've always been an animal lover. Always.
Yeah.
I'm that guy. I'll practically call it a 12-car pileup on a rural road every time I see a turtle crossing. It's stop and get. It's just, I've always been that way, but it never resonated. I never connected the dots. And then when I did, I was like, oh, my gosh. And that was just another added benefit. I tell people that's what I love about plant-based vegan is you can make the one change, and yet you affect multiple things, which is awesome.
Oh, absolutely.
You without even having to quote
the health of your planet.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
And it
relieves a lot of guilt too, because then you're like, well, and the same thing goes if we're going to talk about guilt. It's like people through diets are largely there because they feel guilt and shame. It's like, oh my gosh, my body is doing this, and I need to then abuse it and not eat anything, or I need to do this or that. But then with plant-based, it's like, so let's look into deeper issues. Like everybody that is plant-based ultimately that I've met has some sort of underlying social consciousness that's a little bit more elevated, and that's really nice, where compassion extends from animals to where we're getting our food from. Am I supporting as local as possible? Is what I'm buying contributing to child slavery? Like I said, cocoa. And so it's just nice to relieve guilt from yourself by making conscious and ethical choices. And then to think about what you're consuming. Am I consuming something that was tortured and has that energy behind it because energy is real? Or was this done with compassion and with integrity? And am I enjoying it and looking at it and being grateful? It's just two different world views, really. This consumer mentality versus this mentality of gratitude and wanting to preserve, make the earth better.
Yep. Well, let me ask you this. Speaking of that, all right, kind of along those lines on meals and everything, what just kind of for you, for people listening, what are some of your maybe favorite meals and go-to meals, and maybe especially for people that are just, I've got listeners that are all types that listen to the show. Some are just starting out, some of what would you, are just easy, maybe easy to go to help them get in?
That's my favorite thing, because I'm baking all of the time. And so when it comes to food, I really just love simple, pure food that I can look at and know what it does for my body. So my go-to, I'm like, oh, let's get some chickpeas and saute them in a little bit of coconut oil with turmeric because I acknowledge what that does for my body, with fresh garlic because I acknowledge what that does for my body, and then it gives it a ton of flavor so that, let's lightly add sea salt so my sodium levels are still all right and I'm not going crazy, because that's a lot of the complaints when it comes to plant-based. People talk about how much salt you eat. I'm like, but you salt the steak, whatever, get out of my face. But so chickpeas, I think, on top of kale, I legitimately have always loved vegetables, though. So that's where I'm kind of lucky. I never went through this withdrawal thing. I was just kind of Brussels sprouts. I love onions. I love tomatoes, So basically, if I can have a big bowl of, any vegetable, but really, I think beans and, grains like quinoa and things like this are really easy. Their shelf life is crazy. If you make a big batch, it'll last you for a long time, which is another great thing about not having harmful products, which think about that verbiage. With the health department, animal products are considered harmful. So my bakery is with the Department of Agriculture because there are no harmful byproducts. Even the risk of creating disease while you're cooking from E. coli and salmonella, it doesn't exist. And that's a really beautiful thing, I think, too. But it's just neat. Any vegetables, give them to me. I am a sucker, though, for chips. So when I can make nachos, I'm like, let's put nachos down and then beans. That makes sense, right? So it's leave out the other things. I use hummus a ton as a replacement for kind of a spread or where cheese would have gone, Yeah. And so then it's I'm actually getting protein. I'm not just eating a growth hormone. That's nice. So it's just pretty simple switches.
So is that kind of where you get a lot of your ideas for like some of your recipes, stuff like that, just kind of off the cuff, or what inspires you for that?
Well, I'm trying to lean more and more to just in general eating what is seasonally and locally produced, because I think our bodies are meant to do that.
Gotcha.
And so a lot of the time I'm just at the school on subject, like with their lunches, it's really nice for a creative person because every week I'm like, I have no idea what I'm making. It depends on donations. And that's kind of how I approach the menu. Is like, I don't have a standing menu. I have certain like go-tos that are pretty like present a lot of the time, like blueberry lemon and chocolate chip, these like standard things. But then the ones outside of that, I want my bakers and myself to be able to retain creative, I guess, drive. Because that's another part of loving what you do, is you have to love what you do. And so for creatives, it's like, okay, do you have any ideas this week? Oh, I found some strawberries. Let's make a strawberry this. Or I found blackberries and they were really cheap. Let's make blackberry lime. And so it's just kind of a sounding board, and it usually is based off of what's in season and what we can afford to sustain.
I like that. So the season and the food is what drives you. I like that. You know what I mean?
So.
Yeah, that's cool. Like you said, you let almost nature dictate.
Well, and I think that is another part of listening to the natural way things work. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I like to do that, and I really appreciate other restaurants that do that. There's a great chef up in New York who's like one of the fathers of the farm to table movement, where he cares so much about what's in season and cares so much about that concept that he cares enough about like the soil that the plants grow from. Imagine that. And he cares about feeding. They aren't vegan, but he feeds chickens, like ground up peppers and things that actually give their body nutrients. Mm-hmm. And so then you can taste it reflected in the food. Like when your soil's healthy, then your produce tastes healthy.
Yeah.
Because we can have, produce and you think it's healthy, but not if it doesn't have its nutrients. And it gets nutrients from soil. And so to me, it's just kind of like, man, we need to care. And that's a reflection of our own bodies too. It's like I can appear as a person, right? As a functional, healthy person. But where's my soil? Like, how are my levels? Am I actually getting nutrients? Am I functioning the best that I can? So I think we as people can take lessons from nature in a really like practical, scientific way.
Yep. And you nailed it, because I've read some of the same like studies and all that is so important. People don't realize so many of these farms and all have just been depleted of all the nutrients. And that's what, again, people don't understand. They're like, well, I'm, quote, eating right. Why are my nutrient levels down, this and that? It's because, unfortunately, I mean, you've got good intentions. So it's not that, a lot of times people, they have best intentions. They don't realize they're being failed, by some of these, big farmers and all like that, which where a lot of times I'm with you. I love going, like here locally to the farmers markets and stuff like that, because I love trying to make sure it's stuff organic that I just really feel will have, a much better chance of higher nutrient content in them.
Yep. And just the people who even care enough about that and are mindful of it are more on your side than these big industrial farms that are on the side of profitability. And so to choose to be organic in a time where you can be arrested, to choose to talk about big animal industries and the FDA in a time where you can be arrested for it, like maybe we should be trusting these people, because these people are standing up for something, and they're probably more on your side and probably trying to be a barrier, keeping like the disease away from you and trying to give you what is actually life-giving. And it's really interesting that in our time, this is even a question. Like you can have corn on your plate, but it's been so genetically modified that it's classified as a pesticide. So you're eating Raid. You're eating bleach, and it's like, oh, why isn't my body working right? Why do I feel crazy sometimes? Why do I crash? It's like, because you just ate a bunch of chemicals. Mm-hmm. And you ate a bunch of mercury, and mercury is poisonous, and so it's like, how long can we poison our bodies and to what extent before we stop acting surprised? But then also, like you're saying, these, like, you don't have the opportunity to be educated in it, which I think is another way in which the system fails its citizens. is like, number one, you give us food that looks like food, but it's not actually nutritious, which is the definition of food, as per the dictionary. And then you don't educate me about my choices. And there are misleading labels everywhere, like natural this, natural that. And I'm like, what? Natural coloring? Please tell me what that is.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me the whole naturally enriched thing again. Could you go back over that?
The which one?
Naturally enriched. I love all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, what are you enriching it? Like, clarify. Yeah. Just give me some transparency.
Yes. Yeah.
Because if you go out and you do an organic farm tour, they can tell you everything about what you're eating and what you're seeing, which is that's the beauty of it. But when we remove ourselves from it, we're like, oh, billions of cows were slaughtered today and some workers got disease, but you don't hear about that. You're just eating your burger from Wendy's.
Yep. All right. Well, you've got something else. Yeah, I mean, as if you're not involved in enough. Something else I know you've got coming up. Do you want to talk a little bit about food justice? And I love the title. Food justice isn't just us. Right. Love that.
Well, because I think there are a ton of people. So I think another thing, and this is just a personal thought, is that, so control, right? If you control a population, then you don't have to answer questions. You can do whatever. So that when your population is separated and they don't know that there are like-minded people around, there's not power in numbers. And this goes for any social movement. So it's like when I can start seeing, oh, hey, over there, they're doing something for food. Oh, hey, that farmer's starting to give a crap. Oh, hey, that person cares about nutrition. Hey, that person cares about the environment. Like, can we please have a brainstorming session all together so that we can see then, like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Can I help you? Because you're already in process. Here's how you can help me. And so next Wednesday on the 5th, it's going to be the first meeting, and I really have no idea what to expect, but that's the beauty in not having expectations of like, please just come if you care about it at all, if you have questions, anything like that, because I just want it to be a networking event where people can be like, hey, here's what I do for food. Here's what I do for humans. And I want to address problems like the imbalance specifically. I mean, we're talking about the Charlotte area of the access to real food and food deserts and how we use food as an oppressive tool to those who are low income. And, because like I can have so many different ideas about this, but what if something's already happening that I can just give my time to or give money to or whatever? And so I just want to open up a dialogue locally to kind of address issues concerning food and health and education, and then find resolutions in ways in which people can work together. Because I think that's when the real power is going to come. Yeah.
Very nice. Yeah, I interviewed, David Carter, the 300-pound vegan, a while back. And, he's big. He's very big. That's his thing now, is food deserts. That is his big push. And it was really cool to hear him talk about it and how he, that is just a big fight for him. And so it's very cool you're doing that as well. I love that. And so I look forward to being there and hearing everything.
Yeah, same. I'm glad you're coming.
Oh, yeah.
It's, once again, like, it's not even about food. Like, a lot of people are like, oh, what a first world problem. And you're like, no. This is the world in which you're living. And this is, like, if food is being used against you and you can reclaim that power, then, like, this is actually a human crisis almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, anything else? I mean, I know you've got a ton of things involved in it. And anything else you've got up your sleeve?
Oh, gosh. I don't know. And all the while, I'm still, like, mentally preparing for Big Veg Fest and trying to balance, like, I don't know, having time to try to go to the gym or go on a hike or do something, because it's really easy when you get sucked into things like this to kind of, like, lose any other sense of your identity.
Yeah.
So, I'm just like, let me bake. Let's be open. Please, everyone, just be loving and forgiving of me when I forget things, because I love you and I didn't mean to.
All right. Well, look, finish this for me, if you will, there, and we'll wrap up. I will look back on 2017 and have a huge smile on my face if.
Oh, my gosh. If the FDA is being sued by a mass of people. And, okay, so a more realistic one would be if we can make any sort of impact, I think, in areas that don't have access to real food, from Title I schools to neighborhoods that are left out, I have a food truck that I originally bought and it's not up and running yet. It's been like put on the back burner because of everything else, but I really want to get that up and running so that can be purely donation based and sliding scale, and so that we can specifically have that food truck in these food deserts in these areas that don't have access, and they can be run off of donated produce from local farms. You know, like that is my ultimate dream. So I would have a huge smile if I can make progress towards that.
Very cool. I think that's awesome. Well, where does everybody find you? Everybody listening, where can they find you? I know it's Move That Dough Baking Company, but
Move That Dough Baking Co. And keep up with us, I guess, on Instagram is like the easiest way for me to like tell people where we randomly have events.
Okay.
Right now we're popping up a lot over at Area 15 on 16th and North Davidson. And like this weekend I'll be there Friday through Sunday, 9:30 to 2, and that'll be pretty typical. So that's a good way to find us.
Awesome. Well, Kacie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you next Wednesday.
Well, yeah, same. Have a good day.
You too.
All right. Kacie, thank you so much for coming on. What to tell you, everybody, very inspiring story about the many ways that Kacie gives back. I know when I was talking with her and then putting this podcast together, it's one of those things that just makes me sit back and ask myself, am I involved enough? Am I doing enough? And, what ways, can I give back and to help out as well? Like I said, I do a lot of that. And my intention is with the podcast and the blog and the website to spread, information and inspiration, about the plant-based vegan, diet and lifestyle. But we're always searching for different ways to give back and help. And so, Kacie was definitely a great motivation and inspiration for that. So thank you so much again to everybody for tuning in. As always, don't forget to follow us. Check us out at vegantourguide.com for some other podcasts as well. Email us, vegantourguide@gmail.com. Love to hear feedback from you. Check us out on Instagram, Vegan Tour Guide. Check us out on Facebook, Vegan Tour Guide, or Twitter, Vegan Tour Guide. You guessed it. Make it easy. Same thing everywhere you want to go. Follow us, spread the word. Thanks so much. Constantly getting, some feedback from new people listening to the show that it was just, referred to them by somebody else, one of our, normal listeners. So thank you so much for that. Hope everybody has a continued phenomenal week. Look for your ways to make a difference. We all have a way to give, if you will, our much. Find your much. And when I say your much, what I mean is, you always hear the term, to whom much is given, much is expected. And your much is your way of giving back. Sometimes it's money. It doesn't have to be money. A lot of times we naturally associate that. It doesn't. Find your much. I mean, you heard Kacie talking about the different ways through the school, that she likes doing that. Now, she's got Food Justice Isn't Just Us. That's something she's starting to give back. Plus, Move That Dough Baking. She's always involved in different, charities and things she's helping raise funds for. Find your much, everybody. I challenge you to do that. Thank you so much. Look forward to hearing from you soon. And as always, I want to give Pat Flynn great shout out for his information and inspiration on the podcast, to bensound.com for the use of the audio music we have in here. And to everybody, thank you so much again. Until next time, everybody, live Pura Vida.